By degrees, the comforting light of what you may actually do and be in an imperfect world will shine close to you and all around you more and more. It is this that will lead you never to perfection, but always toward it. Words of James Lane Allen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Cross Street Chapel's Sunday service. I'm grateful for your presence here, for those who've joined us in person, for those who are listening and watching online, wherever you may be, at home, at work. And I just hope that whatever it is that you're seeking to this space, be it a place for sorrow and grieving, a space for joy and celebration, a place for some words of wisdom, or just a chance to rest with the divine, I hope you will find it here, as well as a warm community. And looking around us, I see a warm community already, so I'm grateful to share in this sort of creation of this sacred and beautiful space with all of you. We have as well our call to worship, these words today from Anita Farber Robertson. Welcome to a day of hope and promise, to a place of peace and comfort, to a journey towards truth and justice, and to a community of love and courage that will help us along the way. Amen. Please join with me in our first hymn, which you'll find in the Purple Book, number 10, Be That Guide Whom Love Sustains, hymn number 10. Please join with me in a time of prayer. These are the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTee, the former minister of the Unitarian Society of New Haven in Hamden, Connecticut. This is followed by our covenant, which you'll find printed in your order of worship and will appear online for those at home. But first, these words from the Reverend McTeague. Here in the refuge of this Sabbath home, we turn our busy minds towards silence, and our full hearts towards one another. We move together through the mysteries, the bright surprise of birth and the shadowed questions of death. In our slow walk between the two, we will be wounded, and we will be showered with grace, amazing, unending. Even in our sorrows, we feel our lives cradled in holiness we cannot comprehend. And though we each walk within a vast loneliness, the promise we offer here is that we do not walk alone. This is a holy place in which we gather, the light of the earth brought in and held, touched then by our answering light. The flame on a chalice, the flicker of a candle, the lamps of our open faces brought near. In this place of silence and celebration, solemnity and music, we make a sanctuary and name our home. Into this home we bring our hunger for awakening. We bring compassionate hearts and a will toward justice. Into this home we bring the courage to walk on after hard losses. Into this home we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. By our gathering, we bless this place. In its shelter, we know ourselves to be blessed. Amen. And please turn now to your covenant. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. A few weeks back, I read from The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams, this beautiful depiction of the realness of toys and how it's in the playing and the liveliness that the child brings to it that the toy itself becomes alive, even if in that living it loses some of its shall we say mintiness. It's sort of that novelty that it has, the worn edges, the lost buttons, and so forth. I wonder if that is the case as well with stories. For the story we have today is no stranger amongst these halls, nor elsewhere. It is well known and well worn, but I hope speaks to us nevertheless, perhaps even more. This is an adaptation of the allegory of the long spoons by adapted by Grian Kutanda. It is said that the wise Rabbi Chaim of Romshishok, an itinerant preacher, spent many years rummaging through the books of Hebrew wisdom in search of a way to cross the veil that separates us from the other world. He wanted to know what the other side was like, in order to better explain to his audience the deepest mysteries of the spiritual life. Finally, one day, after decades of tireless searching through thick volumes and deep meditations, he managed to reach his goal. He created a sharp blade with magical properties capable of tearing the veil that separates both worlds. And thus, Rabbi Chaim of Romshishok entered the world which is beyond. He felt a strange bliss when he emerged into the middle of the sunny green meadow covered with flowers. Before him stretched rows and rows of tables, about which people sat as if for a nuptial feast. The tables were overflowing with delicacies and the finest and most delicious drinks imaginable. The rabbi licked his lips at the thought of feasting on such exquisiteness. He could smell the tantalizing aroma of the fine stews that the crowd would enjoy. But suddenly he realized something that surprised him greatly. The people did not look happy, as would have been the case at a wedding feast. Quite the opposite. People were sad and anxious, eager, almost desperate. And what is more, they were thin and emaciated, all skin and bones. What was happening here? As he drew closer, the rabbi realized what the problem was. Braids of angel hair held their elbows straight so that they could not bend their arms, and the only silverware they could use were excessively long silver spoons and forks. Because their elbows were immobilized, they were unable to get the food into their mouths. They were all terribly hungry. And their torture was even more cruel because of the fact of having such delicious and abundant delicacies in front of them, but out of reach. The rabbi was dismayed to see so much suffering, and unable to bear the contemplation of so much pain, he returned to his world to mitigate his grief and put to order his thoughts. What he had seen must have been hell. But hell was not as he had imagined it to be. The next day, after he had recovered a little from his grief, he decided to cross the veil again, but choosing to tear the air in a different direction. Surprisingly, he found himself in the same place, or so it seemed. On the wide green meadow under the sun, there were rows and rows of tables with the most succulent foods and drinks that any human could imagine. But this time, people were chatting animatedly, laughing, and even singing. These people were radiating so much happiness that the rabbi felt his heart rising towards the sun. As he drew closer, he could see that these people also had their elbows tightly bound with angel hair braids, immobilizing their arms. In addition, their silver cutlery was also excessively long. Why were these people so happy when they were being subjected to the same condition as those in hell? As he watched, a woman used her spoon to scoop out some stew and feed it to the man across from her. All up and down the tables, people were feeding each other, so that no one went hungry. Without a doubt, this must be heaven. An idea passed through his mind. With an agile movement, he pulled out the magic blade and deftly ripped the air in the same direction he had done the previous day, thereby opening a door between heaven and hell. He passed cleanly to the other side and ran to the nearest tables of hell. Grabbing a man by the arm, he said, "You do not have to keep suffering. Feed your neighbor across the table and he will feed you." But the man did not want to pay attention to him, nor did the woman he went to next, nor the old man at the end of the table, who responded with a grimace of displeasure. "Do you tell me to feed this man in front of me? Never. I'd rather go hungry than give something to someone so mean." Then Chaim understood that the difference between heaven and hell was in the hearts of the people, knowing in this way the great secret that was hidden on the other side of the veil. Deeply moved, he lowered his head and returned home, thinking about the profound lesson he had learned. He did not realize that he had left the veil torn between heaven and hell. Not long after, the inhabitants of heaven noticed the crack and looked through. They were shocked to see the overwhelming torture suffered by those in hell. And they realized that they would never feel happy again, knowing that just on the other side of this thin veil, there were so many people suffering unspeakably. At last, their deep compassion led them to cross to the other side to try and alleviate the suffering of their neighbors. The people from heaven were not well received, of course, but they thought that with time, the inmates of hell would end up getting used to them and learn how to feed each other. Thus, began the end of all the hells. Amen. Green Katanda's take on the allegory of the long spoons. We come now to a sharing of our lives, of our joys and sorrows, our trials, as well as our triumphs. You're invited to share a candle, to light a candle, and if you have a few words, please come to the microphone so those who are listening online, those who are using the loop system might be able to hear. If you are online, please type into the chat and I will read your message. Thank you, Joe. And as always, you can light a candle in silence. Or if you wish to remain seated, know that your presence here is enough. Let us join now in singing our next hymn in the Purple Book, number 6, Elizabeth Alexander's As We Sing of Hope and Joy Today, hymn number 6. Our next reading comes from Vanessa Rush Southern. So much undone, so much to do, so much to heal in us and the world, so much to acquire: a meal, a healthy body, a fit one, a lover, a job, a better job, proof we have and are enough just around the corner of now. And up against it, the reality of all that falls short in the limits of today. We honor the limits. If your body won't do what it used to, for right now, let it be enough. If your mind won't stop racing or can't think of the word, let it be enough. If you are here utterly alone and in despair, be all that here with us. If today you cannot sing because your throat hurts or you don't have the heart for music, then be silent. When the offering plate goes around, if you don't have money to give or the heart to give, let it pass. The world won't stop spinning on her axis if you don't rise to all occasions today. Love won't cease flowing in your direction. Your heart won't stop beating. All hope won't be lost. You are part of the plan for the world's salvation. Of that I have no doubt. The world needs its oceans of people striving to be good to carry us to the shores of hope and wash fear from the beachheads and cleanse all wounds so they may heal. But oceans are big, and I am sure there are parts that don't feel up for the task of the whole some days. Rest, if you must, then, like the swimmer lying on her back who floats, or the hawk carried on cushions of air. Rest in pews made to hold weary lives, in space carved out for the doing of nothing much but being. Perhaps then you will feel in your bones, in your weary heart, the aching, healing sense that this is enough, even this, that we are enough. You are enough. Enough. Words of Vanessa Rush Southern. So please return with me now to a time of prayer. In this often dark world, when we cannot see our way, we reach out for assurances. We find that which comforts, which provides safety and security. In our aloneness, though, we may not realize that comfort sometimes deteriorates into need and compulsion, that security sometimes prevents us from exploring our true selves. We must search then, not for assurances, but for companions, those who will support us and those we can support in the darkness of unknowing. Bring us together, dreamer, so that we may be a group of companions, being taught and teaching throughout time. Shall we be brought together by what we say? We could not discover words that would convey every heart's passion so clearly. Shall we be brought together by what we do? As Paul writes, humanity is a body, with each person playing their part. Those who are the eyes wish to see, those who are the arms wish to move. How then shall we be brought together? Bring us together to explore the world, not partition it in an angry denial of its unity, but to wonder at its magnificence and beauty, even the arid desert and the dark forests. Bring us together so we may know that we are not alone in our searching. Then, in the world, in this darkness, we may see a glow emanating not only from the distance, but from our community and from ourselves. Amen. And so we now enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. Thank you, Rev'd. Our next hymn is by Gilo, and it's in your order of worship. It's one of the ones that we are doing that's not actually in any of our hymn books. It's a tune that we likely won't necessarily know, so I've asked Rev'd to really play it with gusto so we can fit within the sound that shall go. It's going to go really well. It's beautiful words, a beautiful tune. So, The Alchemy of Healing by Gilo. Thank you. Well done. Well done. It's I know it can be unusual to have hymns outside of our canon, shall I say, but it's something I'm actually, to be honest, quite interested in exploring. Perhaps in this next year or so, is expanding our where we find our musical sources in the hymns that we draw upon for inspiration. There is a well-known story, often misattributed to Native American folklore, but its provenance is much, much, much more recent, and it's often called the story of two wolves. Is there anyone here who is perhaps familiar with it? And I'm sure once I begin, you might hear. It's not a long story. It's a conversation. It's a conversation between an elder and a child. And the elder is telling this child about this inner turmoil that they have experienced through their life, the challenges that they faced, the difficult decisions that they've had to come to. And there is always this sense of the angry response or the joyful response, the bad response or the good response. There's this response that's fitted within war, and another that's in peace. There's a sense of despondency, or there's a response that could be hopeful. Even one might go so far as to describe it as an evil response versus a divine response. And the description that this elder gives to the child is this image of two wolves that are fighting each other and never being quite sure what the result will be. And the child asks the elder, well, who will win between these two wolves? And the elder concludes that the one that will win is the one that is fed. With the imagery and sense that we can feed our anger, or we can feed our joy, we can feed what might be described as bad tendencies or good tendencies, war characters or peace, feed despondency or feed hope. And I was going to say, hate to say feed evil versus feed the divinity. And I say that because as much as this story can have some measure of inspiration, which I'll get to in a moment, it is actually, I think, in a certain sense, less helpful than it first presents itself. And that's why there's many different tellings of the story. Some will be just like that, feeding despondency versus feeding hope. And then others are very brutal in their interpretation of, there's one wolf that's a bad wolf that is evil, and there's another one that's good and that is sort of divinely sourced. And I find myself sort of quite uncomfortable with that. I don't know if it's the Unitarian nuance in myself. But the more I reflected on it, the less helpful, perhaps less disconcerting, more disconcerting I had of it, and perhaps the perception that it could even be possibly damaging story. Because it doesn't provide a voice for the experience of cataclysmic injuries, personal obviously, but even global, the earthquakes in Turkey that we've seen, and the people that are suffering there. I think that they are allowed to have perhaps a sense of despondency at the moment. I think, we can provide hope and care and love and practical support, but we will meet people where they are. It doesn't provide, or it doesn't give recognition as well to conditions such as depression. I was trying to think about how this story could be amended to be a bit more inclusive along those lines of perhaps there is one wolf that keeps stealing the food of the other wolf. And that no matter how much you think you are feeding the hope-filled wolf, the one that is more geared towards despondency, snatching the food away and growing. Or perhaps even the sense that the impression is that it's obviously the stronger wolf, the one that's fed, that's going to be victorious. But They talk about the sort of fierceness of the hungry, the oppressed, those who are facing challenges in life. It doesn't acknowledge time or perspective, that how we recognize our memories shifts over our lives. And it, as I said earlier, doesn't provide that nuance that our lives deserve, that things are not always as either or, that they can be both and, they can be subtle variations of either. So I said that there was some helpful imagery in this story, and that's what I'm drawing upon today, which is that it might tell us not necessarily what we can give ourselves, but what we can give to the world, what we feed the world. Do we want to feed the world enmity or peace? Do we want to feed the world pain or tenderness? Do we want to feed the world judgment or compassion? Do we want to feed the world intolerance or tolerance? This notion of intolerance and tolerance is explored by the philosopher Karl Popper, and sometimes called Karl Popper's paradox. After World War II, he sought to understand the rise of totalitarianism and how it may be prevented in the future. Amongst his reflections was the question of whether we are obliged to tolerate the intolerant. That is, if we consider ourselves to be expansive and inclusive and welcoming people, does that charity extend so far as to people who not only hold differing views, but in fact, were they to be setting the rules, would remove that welcome, that charity, that inclusivity? Written this way, of course, the answer is likely to be no. It is not sustainable to include within the conversation those who would deny the voices of others. It's almost a self-contradiction. It's almost a form of annihilation that the intolerant will tear down those other voices. Though I wonder if religion's call to love your enemy might be some form of accommodation for those who wish our destruction or our exclusion. It's not an easy call, surprisingly. Language is woolly and, as I said, full of nuance, sarcasm, coded language, and the like. To just figure out what someone is saying takes a lot of effort at times. So the question of accommodating not just differing views, but intolerant views is a bit like a tightrope. Both sides need to be firmly grounded and pulled tight for the acrobat to traverse safely. We need to be as welcoming as we can, even perhaps to welcoming in those who hold prejudice and animosity against us. But we must also remember the sacredness of our institution. The sacredness of our institution. It's an expression that I hadn't really used or thought of, at least not for a while. And just writing it, when I was preparing this and reading it out loud now, has felt like a bit of a shock. Ministry deals with a lot of admin, a lot of paperwork and emails, mundane situations, and one is liable to forget that, yes, we are a sacred institution. Not everyone agrees, of course. It is easy to see the pain and violence afflicted on places of worship. The 1963 firebombing of a Baptist church in Alabama that resulted in the deaths of 4 children, referred to as the American Guernica. The shooting last month in a synagogue in Jerusalem, killing 7. The shooting that led to the dead, 2 dead in the Knoxville UU Church in 2008. Innumerable stories leading back and beyond the death of Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral in 1170. All death has a measure of tragedy. When one affirms the inherent worth of dignity of all people, then even the death of those we most fervently disagree with will carry some grief. Location does not add to nor subtract from the loss of life. However, there is something unsettling seeing a place of worship as a crime scene. The unholiness of an act of aggression, malice, and hatred being dealt somewhere set aside for the best in all people. I was lucky enough to welcome a local counselor to the chapel the other day to discuss our outreach efforts and how we may better learn about programs and initiatives that would be in line with our values. They were learning about Unitarianism and had many questions, one of which was what we call this room. And I think for most of us, we just call it the chapel. But when I need to distinguish it from the rest of the chapel, I usually call it the sanctuary. That is the sacred space, the room that is set apart, that is whole and holy. That is why Vanessa Rush Southern's words are so important. We need a place to set aside, to reaffirm the sacredness of our being. There are plenty of opportunities to celebrate our doing, to do more, to do again, to refine. But there needs to be a time not just to not refine, but to reflect. And sometimes we are so exhausted in body and spirit that we cannot even do that. We cannot even reflect. And so we need a space to do nothing, which is actually a very important thing, because it celebrates something deeper than even our core being, our passion, and our personality, our existence, which is holy and good and dignified. Dignified no matter who or how many may challenge us, no matter who may call us sinful or perverse, less than, unseemly, slow, inferior, or worthless. A place where those words are not spoken. Religions frequently use the presence of silence in their holy buildings, whether it is the calm collection of the friends or the ancient priest stepping into the Holy of Holies to say once a year the name of God. Prophets like Muhammad are struck dumb and only able to speak when the Spirit moves inside of them. So perhaps we too can honor those amongst us who are vulnerable, whose lives are made difficult by social forces when they leave this building in an hour's time. Perhaps we can assure the dignity and respect and holiness here by not bringing in those words of malice and hatred. I hope to speak more on this in a future service, but in 1964, Rod Serling, Unitarian and creator of the Twilight Zone, wrote a speech which was to be delivered at an interfaith rally, Religious Witness for Human Dignity, which headlined Martin Luther King Jr. Serling didn't deliver the speech himself. He gave that honor to Dick Van Dyke, but the words are his and written in his clear and committed style. This is what I think is basic. This is what I believe to be the most common denominator in this spring of 1964. This must be first, the recognition and then the admission that the dignity of human beings is not negotiable. The eminent worth of humanity has no pro and no con. And the desperate need for an understanding and a respect between all is as fundamental as the process of breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. We return again to sacred ritual as we are inspired, filled with the breath, as meditations from myriad religions draw upon this connection between our spirit and respiration. The fundamental physical need of all people to breathe becomes emblematic of the metaphorical need of all people
to have this spirit respected. And just as our breaths will mix and mingle amongst ourselves and all the flora and fauna that have resided over all the earth, so too does this common humanity bond each of us, one to another, to those who have trodden before us and those who will come after us. This space must continue to be a sacred institution for whom all people are inviolable, safe. There is, of course, a beautiful element in our faith that there is no distinguishing between the sacred and the profane, or the secular between people. All places are holy, all people are sanctified. Let that mean, however, that the care and the love and the protection that we afford people here is something that we take out into the world. Not that it gives us a license to bring in words of scorn or belittling attitudes. Instead, in this sacred space, we become renewed. Set aside what has hardened our spirits, our hearts, made cynical our spirits, has made fast and angry our tongues. Our respiration is a re-spiriting that prepares us to take this love and compassion and kindness and tenderness and care out into the world. Amen. A few notices before we sing our final hymn. The Faith Network for Manchester and Reverend Malika, who's preached here, she's in One Spirit Interfaith Minister, along with, I believe, Sue Cockerell, will be running Faith in Black Lives Matter. It begins Tuesday the 21st, I believe at 7:30, and then runs for 4 Sundays. Those 1.5-hour sessions. I'll be getting an email out shortly for people who are interested in signing up for that. I can highly recommend the course, please do consider it. Our Friday lunchtime recital is the 24th of Friday. 24th, it's a Friday at 1 p.m. We bring back Aaron Breeze, who's going to delight us with some of his wonderful idiosyncratic music, as well as his own idiosyncratic interpretations of other people's music. That's 1 p.m. It's free entry, but we're grateful for donations which go to the artists to recognize the time, talent, and energy that they have brought to us. And then the third big announcement is that next month, the 26th of March, is our AGM. So there will be a bring and share meal, shortened service, and then we have an opportunity to elect our new committee, to hear reports of the past year, ambitions and hopes for the year to come. It's always a joyful, celebratory experience, so please do consider coming to that if you are able. And again, an email will go out about that soon. And if you are interested in joining the committee, we are grateful to have you. So please do let me know if that is where your interest, I was going to say your passion as well, if you're passionate. And we're grateful for anyone's sort of contributions to the committee. Are there any other sort of I was going to say irregular notices? Yes, John.
All victims reckoned, delivered safe.
Thank you. We're grateful for any donations. You can donate online at tinyurl.com/crossstreetdonate. We have a retiring collection here in person, along with envelopes if you are a UK taxpayer. Thank you. Are there any other announcements that I may have forgotten? Let us then sing our final hymn in the Purple Book, Sally Rogers' Love Will Guide Us, hymn number 98.
Joe, for the IT. Thank you to Anna for the flowers. Is there anyone to help with the tea and coffee? Thank you, Alvin, for the tea and coffee. And thank you, Sonia, for greeting and helping to set up. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close again with some words from Rod Surley. If there is one voice left to say welcome to a stranger, if there is one hand outstretched to say enter and share, if there is but one mind remaining to think a thought of warmth and friendship, then there is also a future in which we will find more than one hand, more than one voice, and more than one mind dedicated to the cause of equality. Amen.